And I was like looking at it a little bit online. This is technically not the title. The poem itself just starts here, and this has just been adopted as the title because it is the first line. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. And I decided I wanted to analyze this on stream as like my first one back, because I think it sort of on first glance looks kind of simple, and this might be because of the repetition. So like a lot of this poem is just do not go gentle into that good night. It appears 4 times, and rage, rage against the dying of the light, which also comes up in the poem 4 times. So you have like a really strong repetition of these ideas, which makes them very important and very in the forefront of the poem, which I think makes it easy to focus on them and know, okay, like, this is the most important part. When you say something and take up like this much space with the same idea repeated, it really just is an implication that this is very important to the poet. Because oftentimes we'll write something and just say it once, and that will be enough. We can say, okay, we've written the line once, and we're good. We don't need to say that again. But if we do say it again, I think it implies some amount of importance. I'm going to read it again, though. I think fundamentally, analysis, being reading, means we have to, if we want to analyze something to a great extent, to do this multiple times. And I think that reading a poem all the way through, start to end, is a very different experience than, say, breaking down a stanza and having a good understanding of the poem as one big unit before we start to break it down into smaller sections can be just a helpful way to have a foundation. Analysis is about connecting things, connections, and sometimes these connections happen like between different stanzas. So knowing the poem as a whole before we start trying to break it down is a useful way to approach it. Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning they, do not go gentle into that good night. Thank you for the follow, Scott Macy. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learn, too late, they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Do not go gentle into that good night. I also think this is like a particularly good one to like show off an analysis of, because a lot of these like short stanzas are quite hard to understand. You read something like this stanza: good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. This is a very dense, kind of complicated sentence that doesn't make its, or sentence, 2 lines, that does not make its meaning entirely evident to the reader. You know, we're talking about a green bay and like frail deeds, which is sort of non-specific. And like even just the grammar, good men, the last wave by, which is like referring to the wave of the good men. It just takes a little more thought to break down a sentence like this. So this poem has a lot of that. It seems very difficult, and that's something that's good to do. So we talk about analysis as understanding, like coming to understand a piece of work. And what this really means is if we don't understand, if we don't actually understand, we have to do some analysis to get to that point. And the basic level is just like comprehension. And I mean that as, what is the meaning of this sentence in terms of the definitions of the word, the grammar that's happening, and all of that? If we don't know this, there's no way we're going to branch out into things like the themes. There's no way we're going to come to like the symbols in the poem, or like the larger structures. I mean, we can maybe look at these things, but we're not really going to understand if we just don't know what the words are saying. So, grammatically, let's look at this. Do not go gentle into that good night. We'll start with this line because it appears 4 times, and as the de facto title of the poem, we should understand what this is saying. Do not go gentle into that good night. So, good night, we sort of see throughout the poem, is referring to death. We have grave men, we have his father on his sad height, and we have, you know, wise men at their end. This is maybe like the best line that points us that we're talking about death. And like a lot of it does. Also old age. So good night is death. And we can think about, death as a night. It's darkness, it's endless, and it's interesting that we call it good, though. We'll come back to that idea later, why this night might be good. But we say, do not go gentle into it. So, to go gentle is a very interesting way to say things, and we have some evidence as to, what this might mean. And we come down here. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. So he sort of tells his father, suggests that he should cry fiercely, is really what I'm looking at here. Be fierce as you die. And this as well. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. So rather than dying in peace, which is what some do, just close their eyes and die. Dylan Thomas says, that is not what we should do. We should burn and rave. Burn and rave and be fierce, and maybe fight until that last moment. So do not go gentle. And this sort of most important line is just the essence of that. Rather than going gentle, easing into death, letting it come to you, should fight. And this, of course, goes into our other repeated refrain, rage against the dying of the light. So this seems fairly self-explanatory now. Do not go gentle. Instead, rage against the dying of the light. This death again. So this is the main thing happening in our poem. It takes up more than 1/3 of the space. Just this idea of don't die peacefully. Fight until death. We'll say rage until death, because that's the words used. Rage until death. This is the essence of the poem itself. And I suggest that it's the essence, not because I know that, but it is repeated so much that it is reinforced into your mind. It becomes the sort of obsession of this poem. This command, this repeated mantra. Do not go gentle and rage. Rage. This is what repetition serves to do in poetry. We talk about all sorts of poetic tools, and repetition is very good at telling us that something is important. I think that's one of its most useful sort of effects, because our poem only has so much space. In this case, we have 3, 15, 19 lines. 19 lines. And we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 that are these two things. The rage and do not go gentle. Rage / no, that's the wrong color. Gentle and rage. 8 out of 19. That's like almost half. Almost half. And if we look at this like strictly numerically in terms of like priority, if we say we could maybe say the amount of space something has in a poem is how important it is. It's not exactly the case, but we can use it as like a way to think about this. If half of the poem, almost half of the poem, is the same 2 lines, then these hold almost like half the weight. The reader spends half of their time with just these 2 lines. And this just naturally makes them important. When we're reading, we also have a tendency when we repeat to like add some shape and interest. And I do this when I'm reading this poem. I say, rage, rage against the dying of the light. It's just something that feels sort of natural as a reader, because if we just say rage, rage against the dying of the light, it just feels repetitive and uninteresting. So we have a tendency when the same thing comes up again to shift it and change it and add more interest and energy and character to that line. Which means by the time we get to our last sort of command to rage, we naturally want this one to be like even more important than the ones before and keep building. Repetition allows us to build. So that really makes these 2 lines like the most important thing happening in the poem, and that's why we want to maybe start by understanding them. But I also think we want to, as a reader, know everything, like know what all the words are saying. We are sort of just losing value, losing joy from our poem if we don't understand all of it. And this is where I make a very important distinction about analysis. Analysis is strictly personal. I have a choice when I read a poem. I could read this poem at this level of depth and stop and just sort of keep reading it at a surface level from there and get like some amount of fulfillment. But if I do more analysis, I will find more depth. This isn't related to anyone else. Me doing more analysis than someone else doesn't make my interpretation better or right or have anything to do with how they interpret the poem. It doesn't have anything to do with the author. It's just about me enjoying the poem more. So when I say like find more value in the poem, for me it's finding like the capacity for more emotion, more depth, more value. And this doesn't have to be the case for everyone. So looking at sentences again, grammatically, old age should burn and rave at close of day. So we did that one. It's again that same sort of thing. We should die with passion, with fire. And now we go into these 4 stanzas that discuss different kinds of men. Wise men, good men, wild men, and grave men. So that's sort of like the pattern here. And then we come back to a closing stanza. You, my father. So, though wise men, at their end no dark is right. Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Dark is right. So, though wise men, at their end no dark is right. So this says, someone who is wise will consider this right, consider death, the thing that is supposed to happen. So there is wisdom in accepting death. Wisdom in accepting or understanding death. That is what this says. And yet, they do not go gentle into this good night. So they see the wisdom, and they still have a reason to not just lay down and let death come. And that is because their words had forked no lightning. Now, it's hard to say, like, exactly what this means, but maybe the internet can help. This is something useful. I don't know exactly what it means to fork lightning. And maybe it's a Magic the Gathering card. Lighting the divines. Okay. So, we can't find an immediate answer here, like, just looking it up. It's not something that maybe has a definition, and that's something that's fairly usual in poetry, which is yet another reason why it's hard. Is poets tend to make up new ways to say things. New ways to say things. And if we do not actively break down what a poem is saying, what a poet is saying, then we're just not going to understand these new terms. Like, we just can't without some amount of active reading. So, what is lightning? Lightning is something that is made of energy. It is bright. And I write this down particularly because light and dark is something that is very important already in this poem. The dying of the light, burning, something that is bright. Dark is right. How bright. And the light again in that refrain. And the sun. And blazing. So, the idea of brightness is very important. And I think we can think about brightness, sort of symbolically, as being similar to life, or maybe representing life. Brightness as life. Because every time we mention it, dark is right, that is, death is right, death is to be accepted. Rage against the dying of the light, the end of one's life, the dying of the light, the dying of life. One should burn, one should live with energy. Crying how bright, good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. So, bright deeds, perhaps these are like the things they did in life, their life's frail deeds. Wild men who caught and sang the sun. They were wild, they were living. So, brightness could be life. It seems fairly consistent amongst these. And in this case, because their words had forked no lightning. So forked can maybe mean like split. But also, words don't really have any impact on lightning, naturally. words are just words. Lightning is this big, powerful force of nature. So for words to fork lightning, to interface with it in some way, whatever this means, their words would have to be, like, very impactful, very powerful, maybe. And I think this might be what this is trying to say. Oops. Because their words forked no lightning. They were not powerful. They did not capture the brightness, the life, perfectly. They did not harness it. They didn't break it down in a way that they were contented with. And so, they do not go gentle into that good night. They keep thinking. The wise man, someone who thinks, maybe someone who writes, since we're talking about words, does not just stop when death approaches. They don't give up their pursuit. We see, like, very, very smart people in history just, like, working and creating new things and ideas, and whether it be writing or, like, scientific contributions, all the way until they're about to die, if they truly have this sort of obsession, this fire, this light. So, this word, obsession, this obsession with life, we might come back to that. But I think that's what this is saying, that stanza. Now, good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. This is just an important little detail of poetry and how it works. The end of a stanza is not, or the end of a line is not always like the end of a sentence. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright, does not make very much sense on its own. But they are crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. So, good men. We have a different kind of men. Good ones. And they also rage against the dying of the light, do not go gentle into that good night. And we say, why would a good man and a wise man both do this? So they, good men, the last wave by. The last wave. So sort of like the last action. And about like waving goodbye. Which makes this a very beautiful little double meaning. Because wave by with an E, goodbye, sounds the same as wave by. So in their last wave goodbye, in their last action. But then also, wave has another meaning, like water, and this stanza also mentions water, the green bay. So, we could have two entirely different meanings to this stanza based on what this is saying. And I think we should look at the middle first to maybe understand that. The last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. So, if we think about this as like a last deed, a last action, and they are lamenting, they're crying how bright their deeds might have danced. They're still thinking in this way about like what more they could do. More deeds. More good. They sort of want to keep doing good until they die. They want to keep having the brightness of their deeds. They're frail deeds because they are eventually going to die. They're sort of impermanent. And in a green bay, if deeds are something that dance in a green bay, then maybe the bay, the thing that holds all the deeds, could be a sort of another representation of one's life. It also has color. We've been talking about brightness as life, and brightness and color are very associated because there's no color in darkness. It's just black. So, for all of the frail deeds they might have danced in their life. So then, good men, the last wave by, their last action is crying about the good things they did in their life. Maybe lamenting that they could have done more, that they could have created more waves in the bay, though this is their last wave and they don't have a choice. But they rage. They rage against the dying of the light because maybe they could have done more, or maybe they just aren't ready. And we could also contrast this. A great way to look at poetry is to look at like opposites. So a bad man would not be crying. We can just invert everything. Bad men, the last wave by, not crying, how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, do not rage against the dying of the light. And if we invert the whole thing, then a man who is bad is just content to die. He is content to not go living on, not do more good deeds. And that sort of makes sense. If we think about a man, put ourselves in this frame of mind, if we measure someone by the good they do, as a good or bad person, the one who is good probably wants to keep doing good. And the one who is bad is probably fine to just not. Wild man. Who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. So, I just noticed something. Wild and wise, good and grave. So these start with the same letters. And usually whenever we do something like this in poetry, this alliteration, although it's over a very large distance, this implies some amount of connection. And we can think about wise men and wild men. Wise men are sort of the ones who have knowledge or maybe somewhat civilized. Wild men, as an alternative, are the ones who are just experiencing life, singing, and just enjoying it. So we have this counterpoint to the wise men, and then good men and grave men. So this is maybe sad, grave, whereas good is maybe more happy. This is Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. And I'm quite enjoying reading this one. It's about making the most of one's life and maybe being sort of obsessed with living and not dying easily. I can read it again. I always think it's good to just keep reading the poem. So here it is. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light has nestled in my brain since I first read it. Oh, you love this, so you know this poem. Yeah. I am really enjoying this poem. It is beautiful. And there's like so many things we can like talk about from it. And there's also so much to break down in terms of like what the heck he's actually saying. So I'm very glad I chose this poem. Yeah. And of course, do not go gentle. Yeah, I think between like the two refrains, do not go gentle into that good night, and rage, rage against the dying of the light. I think I'm more of a do not go gentle girly. This one, maybe in its, I don't know, it's a little like more subtle. It's got the same vibe for me as Second Coming by Yeats. Interesting. Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, the writing is similar. Um, like it kind of sounds similar. They're both from somewhere in the United Kingdom, and maybe similar time periods, I'm not sure. There are two genders, rage and don't go gentle. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of funny because they're like sort of saying the same thing. Um, but yes, there are two genders. Do not go gentle into that good night, and rage, rage against the dying of the light. I mean, yeah, I think they're slightly different. This implies just do not go gentle. Just don't be content. Where rage is more active. So we have an action one, and then like a slightly more like emotional one, maybe. Um, oh wait, that's interesting. Okay. Um, Inky, hi, how goes the stream? The stream is going excellent. How was your stream? I didn't watch it because I'm streaming, but you are my favorite Twitch streamer. They are very different in their message, but the writing is similar to me. I think I feel that if we look at, you know, how do I do this? That the Second Coming we have right here. Yeah. Yeah, I think this one might be a little bit more linguistically dense, but Do Not Go Gentle has a similar vibe. Very cozy. Good. Cozy streams are nice. I'm finding mine very informative, and I'm enjoying this poem a lot, and it's quite fun. And I just haven't analyzed on Twitch in so long, and it makes me very happy. um, your stream was fun, Inky. Inky streams are fun. OMG, what? Who else would my favorite streamer be? Like, it's just, there's no competition. I mean, maybe I'm my favorite streamer, but I don't stream that much. So happy you're back. I'm so happy I'm back. And we're obviously streams are still happening irregularly whenever I feel like it, but the the rage, the desire to go on stream and fork lightning, um, is definitely coming back. It's awesome to hear. I am gonna do the most to catch the VOD for all the spectacular knowledge. Yeah, I think the start of this, I talked for like half an hour about why analyze. I've already had that conversation with you. Um, but once I start talking about the poem, it's pretty good. You're gonna lurk. Enjoy your lurk. And you will be lurking as well as stylish. Well, yes, enjoy the lurk. We're gonna jump back into Wild Man, which is the counterpart, alliteratively, to Wise Man. Wild and wise, good and grave. There's like a lot of symmetry that happens in this poem. We have like the alternating of gentle rage, gentle rage, gentle rage, gentle rage, and but also sort of an asymmetry, and that there's four at the end. But like having this alliteration and this inversion of meaning, wise and wild, good and grave, is very cool. So wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight. Sang the sun. This is like not grammatical at all. And I love it. What does that mean to sing the sun in flight? Wild men who caught and sang. So first they caught the sun. They captured it. The sun. We show again something that is bright. So we have again this feeling of brightness in the sun. And so these wild men have maybe captured this sort of joy of life. They've captured the brightness, they get it. They are free. They are wilds. And then not only did they catch it, but they sang it. They sort of added more experience, more joy. I think song is something that is naturally, like, just very emotional. And I still need to fix the stream elements. I thought I did. I don't think I hit save. Wild and Wise Man reminds me of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. I have not read the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'm told it's the greatest gay love story ever. And that like Gilgamesh and maybe Enkidu like gotta get together and like you can read it as such. At least if that's like I think that's what my friend said. And yes, I will fix the spelling someday. I did. It didn't save it. It's frustrating. Wild men who caught and sang the sun. So they captured the joy of life, the brightness, the essence, and they sang it. They enjoyed it. It's great. And learn too late. Learn. This maybe calls back to like the wisdom, learning, and like wisdom, wise men. So the wild man in his singing maybe doesn't understand his death. They learned too late. They grieved it on its way. On its way. So the only other thing other than the men that we've referenced in this stanza is the sun. So we can sort of assume that we're talking about the sun. They caught it, they sang it, and then they learned too late that it is going to go. What does the sun do? Every single day, the sun comes up, and like sunrise, it's amazing. I love sunrises. There's clouds. The clouds are like pink. And this happens every day. sunrise. And if we think about light as life, then we are born and we sort of find light in the world, and then we live throughout the day, we catch the sun at noon, and then sunset. And it fades. And so these wild men learn too late that the sun is sort of setting, and they don't necessarily have time to come to an understanding because they enjoyed the light to its greatest extent, so they grieve it on its way. As they are dying, they find time for grief. And that means they were living all the way up until the end, and they did not go gentle into that good night. They do not grieve before they have to, and they grieve on its way as they are dying, but still hold on to the sun. That's so pretty. Oh, I love that. I love this poem. That's so nice. I like these wild men. This poem helped me a lot in the worst bouts of my depression. Yeah, I think there's a lot of applications of this. And I want to talk about all the ways that it's so inspiring after we just break down the meaning itself. Because we haven't even gotten through it. It's so good. Grave men, our counterpart to good men, near death, who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. This is on surface the hardest stanza for me. I still have no idea what this means. So we're gonna try to break it down in very real time. So, grave men. So first of all, we can think about being grave as sad is one way. If we describe something as very grave, it's very sad, it's very heavy. But also grave is the thing we bury people in. So maybe they are somehow close to death in more than a literal way, because all of these men are close to death, but maybe rather than being good, they are kind of pessimistic about this. Yeah, serious, dour, important, heavy, and I like dour. You know, looking at death with an amount of pain, whereas the good man, sees it more positively. Wishing they could do more, but also, crying how bright, celebrating the life they lived. Crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Celebrating, maybe crying in joy. I didn't pick that up at first. So the good man who sees things with light celebrates the life he lived. So maybe the grave man is the opposite. Maybe, we'll see. Near death, who see with blinding sight. Who see with blinding sight, blind eyes, could blaze like meteors and be gay. So, gay is, I would say, a strong counterpart to grave. One, alliteration kind of connects these two. Gay and grave. Gay, yay! Yes. This, of course, being, happy. Gay people are happy. So maybe becoming a bit like the good man. The gay man. So, near death, who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. So there's something in death that they do not see. That is like evident. They are blind. So they are blind. And yet their eyes can blaze like meteors and be gay. So blaze, again, this is our recurring symbol of brightness. So, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. So, in their sadness, perhaps, or their seriousness, I like, maybe serious is okay. They're serious, they're dour. What are they blind to? Who see with blinding sight. Like, this is fascinating. Blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze. Also really cool alliteration happening. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. So, they technically aren't. So they do see. They're not blind, and they see with blinding sight. Blinding, bright, again, life. So maybe there's some, like, clarity here? Seeing with blinding sight. It is so, like, they have this understanding that is so powerful about life. They see beyond the veil. They see a truth that's too grand. I like that. Yeah, beyond the veil. So with blinding sight, they understand life and death. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. So a meteor is something that, like, really happens quite quickly. A shooting star. It appears and it fades away. So perhaps even the grave man, who has been grave all of his life, in his end, when he sees what is coming, like, the passion and the energy of life wells up inside of him. In his final blazing moments, he gets this mirth, this gayness, this joy. And so in his final moment, in his way, he still rages against death. He still finds a way to have energy and not just go. Because we might think of the grave man, who is very dour, who is very heavy, as someone who might just accept death. The gay don't see the mundane, but see what the grave men can't. The gay don't see the mundane. Can you explain that to me, Saj Fail? I'm not sure I know exactly what you're saying. As in the greater point or truth. The gay men don't see the mundane, but see what the grave men can't. So, like, as the man goes from grave to gay, this is because he has seen the purpose, he has seen the truth, the death, that, like, he's dead. Maybe there's some Christianity here too. Like, the end of life. Some greater point or truth. Okay, so grave men near death who see with blinding sight. So they are grave, they've been serious, now they see death, they understand. And then their blind eyes blaze, they become energized, they become gay at the understanding of this truth. They understand what they couldn't before, and so they rage against the dying of the light. I like this. This makes sense. Yeah. Stanza's still a little unsure about that one, but like that's okay. Um, like I said, we don't analyze to find necessarily the right answer. We analyze to get closer to understanding. And I definitely understand this stanza for me more than I did at the start. So we're good. And you, my father, if you see the big beautiful mystery, you must rage, etc. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, you must rage. I like you must rage. Mm. Once you understand death, once you see it, once you face it, you have no choice but to live life and to rage because you know that the end is coming. Very like philosophical imperative. Saying this is how, this is what would happen when you see the end. You are no longer grave, but live life fully. I like super feel that and relate to that. I mean, particularly after an attempt at my life, like a year and change ago, seeing that, being grave, and like only after that do I feel I can like enjoy life as well as I do now, as much as I do now. When you realize you can only experience so little of life, you have no choice but to live as hard as you can. Yeah, I like that. Good analysis. And you, my father, there on the sad height. So this is like amazing. We turn from a more general tone, the author, grave men, wild men, good men, wise men, to being deeply personal. And can we undo? Okay, cool. We switch to being personal. This really helped with ideation. Yeah. Sorry about that. No need to apologize. Yeah, that makes sense. And you, my father, we turn it to someone we know. There on the sad height, the end, dying, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So he hopes that his father would do. Father equals Heavenly Father? I don't think so. I mean, so one thing is like when Christians refer to the Christian God, they capitalize. They Father with capital F. And this very distinctly is not capitalized. At least in this version, which is from like Poetry Foundation, which is pretty consistent. Um, and like, I'm also not sure that the Heavenly Father would be described as on a sad height. We think about his place. I mean, he is on a height. But I don't know if we would call his domain sad if we were a Christian. Um, and I mean, we do say I pray, though. But I think it's sort of I pray that you do not go gentle into that good night. You rage against the dying of the light. And I don't think God is dying. Well, could he be saying that God is dying? That's very interesting. Um, that's, I mean, this poem's already very like existential. Um, which is like the school of philosophy that is like Nietzsche and Camus. And Nietzsche talks about God being dead. Um, but maybe we can look at Dylan Thomas a little more. So, 53, this would make him like a contemporary of Nietzsche. Spelled that wrong. After Nietzsche, not a contemporary. So, also hills, height, God is dead, everything is permitted. As I always tell Geek Captain, God is dead, everything is permitted. So, Welsh? What was it? Yeah. Blah blah blah. Found it difficult to make a living. Ingenious use of words and imagery. I agree. He's got some good wordplay in this poem. Blah blah blah. Nothing deeply Christian about him yet. Child's Christmas in Wales. I mean, like, it's a Christian place. It was a Christian time. Lots of places. This is a long biography. Thomas's formal education began at Mrs. Hull's dame school. There was never such a dame school as ours. Firm and kind and smelling of galoshes. Context is important. Sometimes it's hard to find. Stage is an actor. Friends, nervous breakdown. So he was like kind of depressed. The New Apocalyptics. A group of poets. Wild. So maybe he wasn't very Christian. Well, just the letter part. I'm an absurdist and existentialist. Camus is my homeboy. I quite like Camus. Okay, this guy. Ooh, he was radical left? Close links with the communists, supporter of the left-wing No More War movement, and boasted about participating in demonstrations against the British Union of Fascists. Okay, I love this guy. So he probably wasn't super hardline Christian. He escapes Wales, the Blitz, war poetry, films. Wow, he lived a lot. Someone really likes this guy to write so much of a biography. This poem is always linked to the painting The Art of Wanderlust in Your Head. I will look it up after if you remind me. Jeez. Poetic style and influence. Refusal to align literary groups, symbolist and surrealist, symbology for sure, that makes sense. Turmoil, sexuality, Freud. Density, yep, alliteration, internal rhyme, yeah, I'm seeing this too in the poem. Rimbaud. So it doesn't say anything specifically about him being like necessarily like existential, but maybe we can look at this as an interpretation of this poem. We can go two ways. We can talk about a God is dead interpretation And we can also talk about talking to his father. So we're gonna have to like split this in two. Is there a way? Okay, I have to take a screenshot and then take this out of frame because I cannot show my camera roll. And come back to my face. Okay. There are heinous things in the camera roll. You cannot see this. Perfect. Insert a photo. Why won't it let me insert? Insert. Pictures. Let me do it. Okay. Insert pictures. This. Add. Okay. Now we can copy this and paste it again. Here we go. We are going to take two interpretations of this last stanza, which I think is very fun. And you, my father. So, our first one is going to be God. And our second is going to be Dad. So, and you, my father, there on the sad height. So already, the sad height. This maybe says that heaven, not so great. Kind of sad. Which is fascinating. Curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So, we could see this maybe as human dad is a grave man. Maybe. I'm not sure it's necessarily outlined, but maybe we could figure that out. We're here first. We're talking about God. So I pray. So there could be some amount of like loss of faith here. As you, my father, there on your sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears. So like, why would it be a curse and a blessing for him to rage against the dying of the light? Because it's God, right? If he does indeed cry fierce tears, it would mean God is indeed dead or dying. And that would be a curse. And it would maybe also be a blessing, because if he is trying to live like God, if we have this like conflict of faith, maybe he would like to see that God die in the way he believes. If God does not go gentle into the night, then surely we should not either. That would be the blessing of God dying in such a way. Then the curse would be that God is dead. But it invites us, like you say, to live in that way and live with energy, live with our own light. So we could see this as a shift from light existing within God to light existing within self. And that is very interesting. So, it's this shift. And if we are like formerly a believer and believe that like all this good happens in God, and then change it to ourselves, suddenly we have this sort of burst of light and reason to live and energy. And so like there is the blessing. And heaven's the place where we die. It's the sad height. And maybe heaven is also sad, because if we presume that there is a place to go, the more I think about this poem, it seems very not Christian, because he talks about it as the night, a sort of fade to black, rather than going somewhere like heaven. And if we do have this place to go, I think we have much more reason to go gentle. To go gentle, to be comforted, because the Christian might see death not as an end. Death is not the end for a Christian. Death is like a moving on to a new sort of phase of life. Heaven. So they can go gentle. They can relax. They can ease into their death. But if we do not believe in God, that sad height that invalidates the purpose of life, from the non-believing standpoint, perhaps, what reason does the Christian have to make full use of their life if they are guaranteed somewhere in death? And of course, the Christian also has, the Word of God and, doing good deeds and all that stuff. I'm not saying that Christians have no reason to live good lives. But it is sad in a way to know that, this life is not all there is. It flips the whole thing on its head. We think about death as sad. Death is sad because it is impermanent. It means our life is impermanent. It means things will end. But death can be joyful and light because it gives us an imperative. It gives us a passion, a fire to live our lives. Okay, I've convinced myself that I really like the God interpretation. And then this aligns with the existential view. God is dead. All of this moral stuff is kind of up to the person. We live with our own life. If we're talking Camus says to live in spite, basically, of the fact that we are going to die. Live in spite of the absurd and be happy anyway. One must imagine Sisyphus happy in spite of the fact that he is destined to fall. So for the human who is destined to fall, who is destined to ultimately die and not climb up again, we must imagine them happy, and they must rage against the dying of the light. They must not go gentle into that good night. That's cool. Now, we can turn it to the personal level. Let's say the father is his father, his dad. And you, my father, there on that sad height. Maybe just the end of life. We can think of death maybe as the pinnacle before we die. That seems reasonable. And it's sad, because he would be sad that his dad is dying. It's a more straightforward interpretation. Death is sad. Curse, bless me now with your fierce tears. And I think it's important to figure out why it's a curse and why it's also a blessing. Because he says both. And so the father, bless me with your fierce tears. Because I think this would show that his father, rages and does not go gentle. If he cries, his father is doing these things, blessing him with the knowledge that his father lived life at the end with a passion and with a reason and with that energy. And that would be a blessing, to know that as someone goes, they go with that passion, and they go with joy, they go with fulfillment, and they see it. Life, purpose. And maybe the curse is sort of the same as God. If his father cries with his fierce tears, then this is sort of like the final seal. This says his father has seen death. And back to that being sad, that is just a horrible reality to see. His father facing his own death. And like, this is much more personal to the reader, to the author. Just watching someone you love die. But if they do it as such, then you can know, if you know they did not go gentle, if you know they raged, then you can have some comfort in yourself. So that's really cool. Both interpretations are definitely like valid. They both kind of supported by like the context of the text and the maybe some of like the time period and the author's life. One might have to read more Dylan Thomas to really support this God understanding, but it is a very powerful interpretation. So that's the meaning of everything broken down. And like I said in the start, knowing what all of these things mean doesn't necessarily mean I like enjoyed this poem, in that I didn't necessarily like feel every line with all the emotion I could, because what I've been doing is sitting here and analyzing. So I'm gonna read it again and probably read it a few times, and now we're gonna delve into the emotional side of this poem, which we've already touched on with like the father and whatever, but just the feelings that things evoke, and some of like the big symbols and like the purpose that this poem can give us in terms of life. Because we can understand what a poem is saying, and I think if we neglect to connect it to ourselves and like get something from it, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. Before I do that, I am going to go to the bathroom, take a short little break, and then we'll go into that, and it will be great. So I'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back. I am still Ginny, still 2/3 Lotus, still the poet of Twitch, and we are still reading Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. And I'm going to read it again, 1 or 2 times, because reading and reading again is the best way to analyze. Just read it a lot and read it deeply and read it broadly and read it backwards and forwards and all of these things. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. good men. The last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. It's such a good poem. It's so powerful. Like, damn. So, I mean, like, I feel a lot of things in this poem. This poem goes through, like, a lot of feelings. It is deeply sad. Like, if we think about this one as a man talking to his father, and, like, the loss that he is experiencing, it's brutal, it's conflicted, it's difficult, and it's so very, like, alive in the way he describes death. And at the same time, this poem is almost like exultant with the wild men who caught and sang the sun. Every time I think we say rage, rage against the dying of the light, this sort of mantra, it gives us this reminder to live. It makes it so very energetic. And when we're talking about light and brightness and lightning against dark, these, like, there's all this tension, lots of tension, because there's tension in life. And I think, like, the big lesson in this poem, which we can look at, is, like, you know, can this help us understand death? Poetry's great. It helps us understand things that we don't really get, and particularly emotional things. Like, if we see this as a man watching his father die, father's sad height, maybe he's an important man who didn't live with a capital L. Yeah, it definitely could be. I like that, live with a capital L. But I think either way, you know, it's one's father dying. And I think no matter what, this poem is just him, like, grappling with that. And as, like, a way to understand death and understand loss, I think this poem is very helpful to, like, shift the perspective. Because this poem doesn't really talk all that much about death itself. Because even something like "do not go gentle into that good night" is saying to act now, to live in life. And rage against the dying of the light, again, is something that invites us to live with a capital L, to not focus so much on death. And I think that is very, very reassuring. It's a poem about living as a verb. That's wisdom, Stylish Fail. Living as a verb. And I think this poem does something very interesting. You do spit bars. This poem talks about people who are close to death. And if we're reading it very literally, we would say, like, well, then why does this relate to me? You know, Dylan Thomas only says, do not go gentle into that good night, to people who are dying, like, imminently, it seems. There it is, Stylish Fail. You answered it before I could say it. I think we are all close to death in the context of this poem. But we can say, if we look at it, as we are all close to death. Because rather than it being about an amount of time between death that makes us close or not, the fact that our life is bound, that we do have a good night at the end, means that, like, we just are living in this infinitely small amount of space. Really. And so, what choice do we have but to, rather than look at this, live in every moment to the fullest? And that's, like, a reassuring message. We have very little life, and we have to grab it by the gonads. Yes, yeah, exactly. Now, I've been, like, having this thought for a while. Like, you read a poem, and let's say you're someone who doesn't really believe. You don't believe in, like, the message, the theme of at least this interpretation, or any interpretation you can come to. Then, like, what's the point? Let's say you don't think life is about living it to the fullest. Maybe you're, like, the Christian who, like, believes in this God, and you have, like, a place to go when you die. I don't know, there's probably, maybe you're, like, a Buddhist and you believe in, like, detaching from things and not really, like, raging against life. There are a lot of reasons you could probably, like, not agree with what he is saying. And I think that's okay. That's how it is a lot of the time with poetry. And I think a lot of times people will say, like, they'll read poetry and it'll have some message, and you don't agree. So people don't, like, apply it to themselves. Isn't God referred to as the light in some Christian context? Yes, it is. And I think the most important part of poetry, actually reading anything, is application. Let's say you're reading a book of philosophy, and you read all this stuff, and you know what they're saying, just to, like, have this knowledge. Like, why did you read it? What did that do for you? Not much. So I think we have to find a way to apply it to our life no matter what. And if we're already an existentialist, Stylish Fail, this poem, which maybe has inherent, like, existential meaning, is easy to apply. like other people, not necessarily. You say, interesting that earthly life is light here, giving that reference to, giving that reverence to life, not God. Yeah, and I don't think the Christian would find that a very agreeable thing. Um, but I think there are still ways to apply this. So, like, in my life, you know, I find this idea very compelling. This idea of light, the sort of sunset, sunrise. Um, you know, I like tried to die. I tried to end it. Sometimes I feel like I've seen this blinding light of death and like tried to walk toward it. And so having this like maybe I understand like the one must now see life as something to live to the fullest. So the application for me is fairly straightforward. And like maybe the Christian would just apply this to like seeing God somehow. I don't know um how someone who isn't me would apply this poem to their life. But for me, like, I see each of these sort of archetypes as someone to emulate in some way. The wild men who caught and sang the sun, right? This is one way to live. They sort of do not go gentle during their life. This is the one I resonate most with, probably. But then, like, the good men, there's something to this as well. Like, believing in the brightness of your deeds and, like, wanting to live life in a way that is good, or living life to acquire knowledge and try to capture lightning, capture light, come to an understanding. And that is a way we can live too. You can even live as a grave man and be serious and be very sort of focused on like maybe these darker parts of life, the seriousness, the heaviness. And like this poem maybe suggests that even that person can still find this like joy and this passion. I haven't attempted, but I've been tempted all my life. So I get how it's meaningful. Yeah. I think this poem definitely means a lot for me in that way and resonates with me. Um Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Yeah, so we see like maybe a guide on a way to live. One we might not exactly agree with, but like maybe someone just agrees, like the very hedonistic person, with the wild man who catches and sings the sun. Then like that is the part of the poem you can draw from and find value from. Maybe you believe in doing good things in your life and making waves in this green bay, this bay of light, other people, and making the most of your frail deeds. Then you can gravitate toward this part of the poem. Or maybe like you're dealing with loss, and this is the part of the poem that can help you the most. And I think it's useful to understand that like the whole poem doesn't have to mean something to everyone, but it you can allow parts of it to mean something, and you can allow parts of a poem to really resonate with you. And if you do that, you'll find your value, and it will like mean something to you. And like this is why I think poetry is very personal. Reading it, analysis is deeply personal, because I can look at these words and they mean a different thing to me than other people. Like admittedly, when like Sadish Phil, I know you're lurking, but when someone in chat like suggests an interpretation, it's always sort of hard for me to like really utilize that because it's usually entirely different from the way I was seeing the text in the poem. And that doesn't mean theirs is less valuable. It just means that, like, we should probably all go analyze poems and, like, discuss what we think they mean. And it's useful to see other meanings. Um, so, I like this poem. It can mean a lot of things. It is very powerful. Talks about, like, real stuff, for sure. Death and all that. And I'm gonna read it again. Maybe I'm gonna read it twice, probably, because I really like it. And I think that's like the most important part of analysis is to go back, read the words, feel them, enjoy them, and like, otherwise, what are you doing? Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men at their end know dark is right. Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on your sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Gives me chills. That's what I chase in poetry, is words that give me chills. Like, sometimes I'll write and the words are the right words and they just make me feel something, feel overwhelmed with emotion. And that's what I try to chase, that feeling. And I think analyzing and really understanding what's going on can help me get there. And like, this poem gets me there, which means it's amazing and it has mattered to me. And that's good. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning. They do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on your sad height, Curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So good. I love poems. Poetry's amazing. We didn't even talk about like everything that poem does in terms of sound. There's so much beautiful alliteration and rhyme, and so much more that can even be pulled out from the poem. But like that's definitely enough analysis for me for now for today. um, I've always wondered what it would be like to go back to a poem later and like analyze it again, see what has changed. Because I've never done that. I've never analyzed a poem twice, and that's sort of a fascinating concept to like see how we change. Because the poem doesn't change, but I'm sure it would feel very different. Um, Rereading books, same reason to do that. But that is my analysis. That is my thoughts on Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. That is my very honest reaction and emotional enjoyment of a poem. And definitely one of my favorite ways to read something. To just break it down and get to its core. So, I mean, I guess that's all. I don't have much else to talk about unless people have things they want me to talk about. Um, Questions, comments about the poem. But like, otherwise I'm done. More than 2 hours of a stream. Like, hour and 45 of analyzing a thing is awesome. Probably put it up on YouTube like I used to with the poetry, and that will be there for viewing enjoyment and reference. And yeah, that's all. So, I mean, I've been Ginny, the poet of Twitch, Cheather's Lotus. Um, and thanks for watching. Thanks for lurking, those who did. And I hope you all have a beautiful and artistic day. Bye.